All right, I think we got it. Perfect. So I'm super excited to have Dr. Liz with us tonight. She could speak about so many topics, but I asked her to come join us tonight to specifically speak to MDMA. So over the last 6 months, I reached out to everyone and said, what do you really want to learn about? We're all pretty steeped in mushroom ed here, and all practicing with mushrooms from just beginning to about 13 months in, for the people that began last year. So MDMA was the number 1 thing people requested to learn about. I think because it's been in the news quite a bit, but also we've had a number of guides speak to, they use both. So they utilize both MDMA and psilocybin in their work, sometimes in tandem and sometimes beginning with MDMA before they move to mushrooms journey work. So thank you so much, Dr. Liz, for being with us. If you want to hop on.
Hi.
Good for you. Hi, good to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, are you back in Santa Cruz or are you in Kauai right now?
I'm in Santa Cruz. I shouldn't say that with such chagrin. I'm very blessed, but Kauai is a soul home. So
beautiful. A couple people in our community are on their way to Kauai right now.
Woo.
So yeah, super special place. Yeah. So I have some pre-prepared questions for you. And then also some of the folks here have questions too they'd love to ask, but I'd love to start with just, you have such a diverse, beautiful background. Just love for you to introduce yourself and talk about your work in Santa Cruz.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just switching gears. Actually, I was teaching shamanic energy medicine right before, so I'm a little raspy. So that's one part of my journey, but I'm also trained as a psychologist, and I have a background in working with health in the body. I trained in behavioral medicine, but then I worked for eating disorders for a long time, and what I kept finding at the core again was trauma. And even if it was anxiety or depression, I could link it back to trauma. And so I just became really interested in how do we actually heal trauma? And that launched me on my own personal journey and also my professional journey. So I'm a big proponent in embodiment practices and getting us back in the body. I'm also, I love IFS. I don't know if anybody knows that, but internal family systems. Also, I'm going to say all these little things because they actually all come together. The Enneagram is something that I find really fascinating, not only for personal identity, but to get beyond, and then spiritual development. And a little bit about my name. So I was adopted several months after I was born. I was given up for adoption. And, that created some kind of attachment, traumatic imprint that I had to work on, especially because my adoptive parents and I had somewhat of a temperament mismatch. In my early 20s, I reconnected with my birth mother, and she lived in Santa Cruz. And that's actually part of the reason why I came to the left coast. But the first place she took me was Esalen Institute, and in Big Sur, California. And I really went on this process of finding myself and my identity and who I was. And I actually was going through a divorce subsequently thereafter, my early 20s. That's a whole other story. But when that process happened, I had a red pill, blue pill moment of who am I? Who is really coming through? And Esalen was my last name that came forward on the cliff, and really choosing to step into this transcendence. And it's just interesting when you look at MDMA that a lot of the original roots happened at Esalen. in the original conferences, and the major thinkers in the psychedelic movement were happening at Esalen. And so was the Enneagram, which is interesting. So one of the Naranjo was one of the early psychiatrists to do research on MDMA. So I have a personal karma with this medicine. When I encountered it, I had felt a yes, and it is in my service to really honor the medicine. So here I am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So can you explain to us, a lot of our audience is brand new beginners to MDMA. So can you just describe what MDMA is itself? Is it a plant? Is it a chemical? Yeah, just tell us about the substance itself.
Yes, it is synthetic. It is not of the earth. I love how we've co-evolved with plants, and there's a healing intelligence in the earth medicines. But I also believe in medicine and medication. And so this is a synthetic drug, but it's also the neurotransmitters that it acts on are inherent to our body. So it acts on serotonin, which most people know. They've heard of SSRIs, and norepinephrine and dopamine. So it's in that category. It's both a stimulant and a psychedelic. So this has the stimulant effects, but in the psychedelic, it does induce a non-ordinary state of consciousness. It's not a hallucinogen. Like one of the original compounds that they studied was MDA, which is more aligned with sassafras, but this is another molecule and version that has moved along. It's also, the last thing that I'll say is that it's an empathogen. It's a part of a drug group that induces exactly that, empathy. So different states of openness and oneness and connectedness. And it's also an entectogen, which is to go inside, to look within. So that's kind of just a ballpark of what it is. I actually have to write it down, the actual name for it, because I'm always impressed when I can just pull this off. The actual name is 3,4-methylene dioxyamphetamine. I actually have worked a lot on trying to get that.
That's, yeah. And when would you say, when did it, because most of us who are of a certain age, associate MDMA with a dance drug, a rave drug. And so when exactly did people discover it could be used for therapeutic application?
Well, what's interesting is most people think it was a party drug, but it actually was a healing drug. It was a therapy drug many years before it ever hit the dance and rave scene. It was actually a compound found all the way back in 1912, which, if you think about it, that's a long time. And then Naranjo was studying the MDA, but it had a high level of toxicity. And so they wanted to find another thing. So he worked with a chemist, and then they came up and worked with this compound, MDMA. And so it really was used for almost a solid 10 years with hundreds and hundreds of trained professionals and thousands of individuals in individual one-on-one work, weekend intensives, group therapy, couples therapy, end of life. I mean, you name it, it was really used extensively for 10 years. So a lot of the greats in even the psychological movement and spiritual movement were involved in this. It started picking up speed in the 80s with the rave scene and the party scene. And I just kind of want to differentiate. So that usually is not a pure medicine. It's usually laced with caffeine, cocaine, ketamine. So it's very different what we're working with when I'm working with people and what they're doing in clinical trials and what I'm going to be doing in expanded access. It's a very different pure drug. But in the 80s, I'll just say a little bit more nerdy, because I just love this. it started picking up speed, and the DEA was going to move towards classifying it as a controlled substance. And so they did a lot of effort to try and prevent that from happening. There actually was a trial, 84, the judge recommended, because of low toxicity in humans, the moderate substance abuse potential, it's not severe like a lot of substances, the therapeutic benefits, the judge recommended it wouldn't be scheduled, but the DEA said no. And Reagan was our president during that time, and there's a big initiative for war on drugs. So since then, it's been an underground movement, and now it's in clinical trials. So we're actually in the phase 3, which is amazing. MAPS was formulated, it's raised 130 million in research and education. If this passes and gets rescheduled, it will actually be the second drug ever that's a nonprofit drug. It's the first being a birth control. So just a phenomenal background.
Amazing. Amazing. So what is MDMA therapy particularly good for? Trauma for sure, but can you expand upon kind of what is most recommended, or when is MDMA most recommended to begin with?
Sure. I know you were talking about psilocybin, and I usually feel like psilocybin is really good with reconnecting with awe and wonder. It's doing the hero's journey, which is trials and tribulations. It's really going. And then you do a lot of preparation, and then you have a moment where you fight the dragon, where you potentially face ego death. And then there's a transcendence and a connection. So it really can hit this high level existential, spiritual connectedness, which I love. Sometimes people are not ready for psychedelics. I mean, that's just, we basically, if we think about even PTSD, a lot of the signs and symptoms, and we look at intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts, overwhelming, avoidance of certain things, super hyper arousal, reactivity, defensiveness. I can think of the past several years in the pandemic, how are we collectively holding this? So even though I'll say trauma, I really feel that there's a way that we have been taught to disassociate with our self, our higher self, our bodies, our earth. And so a lot of people need that foundational medicine. And that's where I think MDMA comes in, because it's a very, you can feel your breath almost moving in and out of your body. You can have this sense, if you've been disassociated or you have these negative experiences, it can create more awareness, introspection, but without the threat and without the overreactivity or stimulation. And so I usually like to think of MDMA as a foundational building block to get that sense of your soul self, your essential self back, to do some different work to be able to be here and feel trust, and then with the other, and an openness, perhaps even with life. And then I find that it's a really nice movement then to go into different psychedelics where you can really handle those kind of experiences like ego death.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful description. Thank you. I've heard mushroom medicine described as being very internal versus MDMA can be quite relational.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of it?
Yeah, I think I've heard you say heart medicine, and I love that. It's really, it's true. Yeah, I'm just even going to do this signaling, like even with mushrooms, it is this and it's this energetically. And then MDMA really comes like here. It just has this whole kind of like where you find your energetic core, where you find resonance. Because it is an empathogen, it activates a sense of openness, introspection. It's a safety, like you can approach things without the same fear or defensiveness. You can feel open again. Because it acts on different hormones, it's easy to see. So it depresses the left amygdala, which is your fight or flight system, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. That happens in trauma where that gets activated. In MDMA, it actually depresses it. So you can be with really intense material, but have this graciousness, this compassion, this understanding without getting re-traumatized or reactivated. And then it also acts on, so the serotonin, the good feelings, the dopamine receptors, it really enables that sense of like, oh, I feel alive again. And then it also works on your hormones of oxytocin, touch, bonding, love, and vasopressin. So it's enabling a person to really not only come into their heart, but in relationship with others. And a lot of times, if you think about it, what are two of the biggest things that people suffer with? And that is what I would call trauma, some sort of trauma, where you detach from self, and also relationships. And so this medicine can really support healing in both of those paths.
Beautiful. That perfectly ties into my next question for you, which is, I've heard MDMA often in the context of couples therapy.
Yeah.
That people are introduced. Can you talk about that and why MDMA is a good choice for when people are working together with medicine?
Sure. I mean, there's not enough research. There is some, and what the research has found is it's phenomenal. What they found in the clinical trials, even if it's not couples therapy, is it improves. They found an association with it improves people's interpersonal relationships. So, and I think of whatever, we have to have connection with self, and we have to learn these skills. But when you're in relationship, you really have to know these skills. So can you listen without defensiveness? Can you have compassion? Can you re-access those love states, that inherent trust in the process and each other? It can really unblock a lot of couples that feel entrenched in and kind of like this pattern, or where they can't communicate. So you think about just all the ways that it can heal. I mean, you magnify that with relationships. So yes.
Fantastic. And so we're toward the end of FDA approval, right? And your center is going to be one of just 10 sites, right, that are MAPS approved to have MDMA therapy, MDMA assisted psychotherapy, right? Am I saying that right?
You are.
So when that is approved and legal, can you take us through what that will actually look like for a client? Will it be a set protocol, a series? What will that look like when it happens?
Yeah, so it is in phase 3. They've published the results for that first half of phase 3. So they're finding, this happened in phase 2 and phase 3, that in a year follow-up, 67% no longer qualify for PTSD. I mean, if you just even think about that, what have we found in medicine, mental health, that has that kind of potential? It's not an approved treatment yet. It is in clinical trials. Because of the results are so phenomenal, it actually gained a breakthrough therapy designation, which means that the cost, the benefits outweigh the cost. And so I am of the division called Expanded Access, where they are green lighting it while it finishes clinical trials to bring it more to the public, because there is such a huge need. Should it become a rescheduled or a legalized therapeutic treatment, then we would be positioned and ready to go. So I'm super excited about that. So, okay, let me just bring you through. I heard people talking about a lot of the, key steps in any kind of psychedelic journey. In order to participate in this, you do have to do a screening process. So you want to think about like somebody with liver issues or cardiac issues or active substance abuse, or if they're pregnant, that's kind of some no-brainers that it wouldn't be a good fit. But we do a screening. And then after that phase, then we do 3 hour-and-a-half preparatory sessions where you meet with a therapeutic pair. And this is going to be your therapy pair all the way through. And you're doing a good preparation of everything, orienting them to what's going to happen, the risks, the potential benefits, any kind of questions to get them ready for that. Then you have what we call the experimental session. So that is with therapy. It's about 8 hours with a therapy pair with the investigational drug, MDMA. And so we are with you, and there are the same nightshades and music. I heard you talking about the inner healing intelligence. Yes, yes, yes. How amazing when we can go inside and connect with that inner healer, our inner sage, our inner wisdom to harvest and show things and really trust the medicine and trust the process. And how is this coming up for my greatest good with the intention that I set? And so we will do that. We give electrolyte drinks, which are pretty important. We check kind of different physical symptoms because there is a temporary elevation in blood pressure and temperature. So we're just really thoughtful of that. And there will be periods of silence, and there will be periods of talking and witnessing. And this is where I love, even though it's a non-directive approach, I've found that in the orientation of internal family systems, that idea of like self with a capital S, and we have all these other parts that can be protectors, that almost inherently shows up in sessions where we connect with our essential self, our soul self, and we can access that greater wisdom. And then we can also see these other parts and have deep inherent compassion, and instead of being in the shadow and these scary, fearful things that we've maybe thought were maybe made us a monster on the inside, would they actually, we befriend them. We just don't have them drive the school bus anymore. They can sit on the bus, but they're not the drivers anymore. And so that's the session. And then they stay the night, and they have a night attendant. And then the morning after, we do our first integration session, which is an hour-and-a-half, which is super important. We do 2 more, and then we wait. So 3 preparatories, an experimental session, and 3 integrations. You wait a month, and then you repeat it 2 more times.
Beautiful. Now, do people, to qualify for the treatment, did they have to be diagnosed with a traumatic disorder?
Yes.
For
right now, they're defining it as treatment resistant. So have you tried therapy and it didn't work? Have you tried an SSRI? Have you tried another therapeutic drug and it didn't work? And so the diagnosis for right now is PTSD. I actually think it was very intelligent design because it's a non-polarizing political agenda we can all hold. How trauma impacts everyone, and how profoundly debilitating, and how a lot of people just continue to suffer. And so people can rally around that, but they are testing off-label. They will create other different clinical trials. Right now it's had 3 clinical trials, but primarily the one that I'm going to be working with is for PTSD.
Got it. Got it. And is there anyone who MDMA is contraindicated for, or are there side effects with some? Yeah,
there are side effects. So kind of what I mentioned, some of the earlier issues, you don't want to be pregnant while doing it, liver and heart. The main side effects of it It is it doesn't have a high toxicity. I know that it has that reputation, but if you think of the street drugs are very different from the purity of the MDMA. The other side effects are where you have the stimulant effects. So you have perhaps muscle tension. There's, the jaw clenching. There's different. You could feel dizzy when you stand up. You could initially, when the medicine comes on, feel anxiety because you're transitioning between different spaces. So that can be activating for people sometimes. And there is just emotional stress, especially when we are doing sessions, because we have an agreement to work specifically on certain trauma. So people will feel sometimes emotional distress, but it usually is accompanied with this greater awe and understanding and openness, and it does generally deactivate fear. But so it kind of can hold both. But the main things that you would have to be concerned about, the risks, absolutely no mixing with SSRIs, SNRIs, because you can get what's called serotonin syndrome. So that's why we have people taper off medications in order to be able to do that. And so absolutely you want to be thoughtful and not combining that. That can be too much and it could actually be fatal. The other piece is that some people, it can elevate your body temperature and it can actually lead to dehydration, which is interesting. And so you just want to be thoughtful with body temperature. And then the last thing, the greatest risk that they found is it can really throw off if you want to drink water. So they found kind of in the raves and the unsupervised medical scenes that people were consuming a lot of water, and that leads to hyponatremia. Your electrolytes get off. So you just want to be thoughtful, more than 3 liters, and make sure that you have electrolyte drinks while you're using the medicine. So those are kind of the big risks. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. My next question was, and some of our shares earlier in the evening tonight spoke to, the integration period.
Yeah.
Being with psilocybin, people expressing a heightened sensitivity, deep permeability.
Yeah.
In the weeks following. What can people expect in the weeks following MDMA?
Totally.
I've heard some people speak specifically to a dip in mood sometimes following, and I've also heard some guides speak to following with different plant medicines and MDMA experience to rebalance that and kind of take the edge off of that occasional dip sometimes following. So yeah, if you could talk a bit to the integration from MDMA and also the dip, if there is one.
I love hearing about the integration. I would actually say the preparation and the integration are way more important than the peak experience. Michael Pollan's book that came out, he was really great about talking about how we need to have these regular practices to anchor in these peak experiences, because otherwise you're just a peak seeking junkie. And what is it doing? So the setting the intention, what are your goals, preparing, entering into this sacred journey, you are doing the heroes and heroines journey. And so you don't immediately go to fight the dragon. It's really, you have to have these trials and tribulations, this preparation to be ready to have that moment. And then, yes, you do have this defining moment, but the integration then is, how can you bring it all together? How can you really garner the true gems and medicine into your life? It's a really sacred time. And I think not enough people really honor the integration and the slow down and the restore. And yet that period is where I think people can have the greatest benefits. So I'll kind of just start there. Yes, there is a dip in that your body has been flooded with serotonin, that can make, bring all the different effects. Um, and yes, from potentially like 24 hours or 48 hours, there can be some dysphoria or a drop in energy. And that's where your body is metabolizing, and then your neurotransmitters are going to start kicking in again. It does kind of your genetic predisposition and also your general health can affect that. So good eat, rest, movement, those sorts of things are all great integration tools. Art is really great, nonverbal. So there can be a dip. I'm trying to remember, was there another question in there that we said integration and dip?
Sorry, I wove a couple together in that one. Sorry about that. No, that's perfect. Yeah, things you can do kind of lessen to that effect, but diet and lifestyle, yeah, in the preparation process. Yeah. My next question is just a little bit more personal. You've been in the healing arts for a very, very long time. And as this moment gets closer to utilizing medicines and really bringing them into people's lives and into our healthcare practices in a vaster way, like what are you most excited about as this gets closer and closer?
Well, your smile is saying it all. I mean, that's how I feel. Like I could answer the question with like,
Right.
I mean, as a practitioner, I really have a commitment to what works. I just want what works. And so, embodiment, spiritual practices, doing personal development. But wow, if we have the potential to reset and reconnect, and connect with our higher self, and connect inherently with others and trust in the bigger, perhaps the universe and the greater design, we can get beyond the ego, connect with our essential self and what we've come here to do. So I want to see everybody like lit up to their infinite potential and what they came to do. So
right.
Could we do that? That's amazing. I hope so.
Right. Do you, as much as you want to share, I'd love for you to share your personal path and what medicines have meant most to you and how.
Gosh, I know. I really thought about how I'm allowed to answer this question. Let's see. What could I say? The first thing is I'm really bummed that the FDA did not approve for anybody who is going to be offering this medicine to go through their own experience. The protocol for the practitioners was actually denied. So they did do a clinical trial on healthy subjects, which is great, but that was denied. And so the way that I will answer that is I think it's so important to really feel something, know something, integrate it to bring it the highest honor and integrity. And so that's how I would answer it.
Understood. So much of our world is just patently ridiculous right now, but that it's just another example of that. It's how can you share something that you yourself have never experienced ostensibly,
Right. I would be scared to follow
right.
Sometimes, especially because it's in non-ordinary states. I do feel like you can work with people if you haven't had your own trauma. You can treat PTSD, you can treat eating disorders, but wow, if you have really done your own work, it's embodied, it's felt. So what a tremendous gift to really trust the medicine, trust the process, and the inner healer.
Beautiful. And then my last question before turning it over to you guys and open it up to everyone. Most everyone here is just starting on their path, even the first few years, you're still at the very beginning of your path. From what you've witnessed, experienced, seen, shared, what advice would you share with people just starting out on this path?
Hmm.
Can be
I'm
more than one
tuning-
thing. Yeah.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
really tuning into the group. I'm just going to listen again and feel kind of the collective intelligence. I think it's honoring the hunger and the desire, what we're drawn to ultimately, I believe, can be because we have inherent untapped gifts and a calling, a way to be of service. And so honoring the phase of where you're just learning and being like a student, and not rushing ahead, allowing that spaciousness to prepare over and over again. And then allowing these big moments to happen in your life. And again, then slowing it down, letting it really integrate to your life, but allowing yourself to have emotional alchemy, spiritual alchemy, to release the different layers of attachments, of maybe stories, what you should be, who you think you are, and be in that deep, compassionate, curious state, and trusting that and allowing that. And as you fully integrate this experience, you truly will be of service by just even being a light for how to wake up and trust in life again, and try and unearth your sacred gifts. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. I want to open it up to everybody. Carmen, if you want to, I know you had a specific share, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Liz. That was really so informational and just beautiful descriptions of this medicine. And I actually came to the medicines first through MDMA. And it was through a friend of mine that I opened up to and was sharing just how really lost I was feeling, kind of at that point where everything I've tried in my life for 40 some years just was not helping me get through some trauma work. And it was just, I just felt so stuck. And I've done body work, done therapy, done, just about everything possible. And he, thankfully, he was a friend, but he also was a therapist and had experience with plant medicines and MDMA. And he kindly offered to share a ceremony with me. And so that was my first introduction. And it was absolutely beautiful. Like you said, very intentionally done, as if it was a full journey. And he beautifully prepared me. And the experience was that like 7-8 hours. And it really helped so much to pave the way for a completely new level of healing for me. And I'm just incredibly grateful for that. And he chose that, because we were talking about other medicines, but he chose that specifically for the reasons you talked about, that the qualities of the medicine really open your heart, it was like one of the first times I felt my mind really, that fight or flight that has just been hyperactive my entire life, just settle down a little bit. And it was just, again, it's these touch points that the medicines give us that we can keep going back to and keep making, getting a little wider and wider in our lives. And the medicine has beautifully done that. So that was about 3 years ago, that experience. And then with the same friend and guide, did another experience with combining it with the psilocybin. And it's just continued to be a beautiful tool and assistance in opening up and really finally healing, really releasing a lot of what was been carried in my body.
Amazing.
Yeah, so incredibly, uh, incredibly helpful. But I did have a couple questions about it. I noticed that, the activating part, the body tensing up and the stimulating effect. I did notice that sleep often was difficult the evening after.
Right.
And my partner's also had headaches both times she's experienced that. And I wanted to kind of see what you thought of that, if there's any tips or guidance. And I think Casey did have another question, and that was about, are there other plant medicines that might help post MDMA? Like, I don't know if cacao might be a nice, because I know that's for me also another heart opening medicine. Just your thoughts on that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Just integrating what you said, I'm really getting how you had that starting point. And I loved what you said about that felt sense, where you have that a little opening and it's your reference point. And that's then what you bring into your life and you expand and expand. I mean, beautiful. That is exactly what I would hope anybody would do with this medicine. So wonderful. I don't think I'm part of a clinical investigator, so I don't think I have the authority to actually, I'm glad other guides brought in different plant medicines. What I would say is the plant world, so nourishing foods. I am a big proponent of supplements. So magnesium, vitamin C, those sorts of things. Magnesium is really important. It can help with sleep and release some of the muscle tension and the clenching. And most people are magnesium deficient. I mean, we think about the relationship with the earth and what's happened. So our relationship with self shows up with the earth. So we've really pushed it and depleted our minerals and soil, from the soils. And so I do believe that, we can get really great micro and macronutrient dense foods, but also supplementation can be really beneficial. So I usually like to work within that category and heavily focus, especially on vitamin C and magnesium.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, the magnesium was one I came to because it was a similar symptom I've had at other points, and the magnesium definitely helps the muscle. Just
it
that,
does.
that tension. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I also thought. Oh,
can I say one thing? I would also, even though it does disrupt, even if it does disrupt sleep, or there are experiences afterwards. I mean, a good preparation and a good integration will help you integrate, even though you might uncover some really big material. Just trust the journey. Even in those uncomfortable moments, we lean in and we stay with it and we just kind of breathe. And even in those things, there can be certain things. Maybe you're not sleeping, but perhaps you're lucid dreaming. I mean, there's many different things in the great mystery of that activation. So I would also just, you set your intention, let the medicine journey work its way.
That's so beautiful. That's so helpful. And I think after I was resisting that lack of sleep, I kind of said, you know what? There's a reason for this. Just quit trying to rush the process and just let it be and receive it as a gift and a message. And so thank you for that excellent reminder. Very helpful.
Awesome. Rob, are you up for, do you have any questions for Dr. Esalen? Or I'd love for you to share your experience if you're, as much as you'd like to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've only done one journey in my life, and I talked about it briefly on, I think, on the last call. I was way back in October. And interestingly, it was a combination of MDMA and psilocybin. I believe we were given 800 milligrams of MDMA to open our hearts, and then 3 grams, 1.5 grams of combination of golden teacher, Venus envy, and what, I forget the third one was. And then after an hour, we were all given the opportunity. There was 13 of us, plus a couple of sound healers that were our guides, and given an opportunity to do another 1.5 grams. And I think everyone said yes. I was pretty out there, but I figured, what the heck, now's the chance to do it. So I did. And I actually shared some of this with you, Casey. I mean, for me, it was an amazing experience. I mean, I've done MDMA maybe 7 or 8 times in the last 2 years, and I'd never done it before 2 years ago, and I'm an old guy. So, but it was never anywhere close to a journey dose, and I thought it was amazing. Certainly, it's a relationship drug. It's amazing. But anyway, so I was expecting that I would, I was geared up to set intentions, which I did, and then I was expecting to maybe meet my demons, right, and lean into them, and there was no demon in sight. And I was just feeling amazing for 4 hours. I had a smile emblazoned on my face, and I had nothing but amazing thoughts in my mind, bouncing all around through this huge open, universe. It was amazing. And it was, I loved it. In fact, someone who was experienced said, well, you obviously have a very high happy set point. And I said, okay, maybe I do. But I was thinking afterwards, and Casey, you even mentioned it, you said, well, maybe it was the MDMA that kept you happy. And so I don't know why I haven't done another journey since, and I really want to. But my thought was, well, I need to do more psilocybin and maybe not do any MDMA, because I'm ready to meet that demon that I've never met, or demons. And so I'm just wondering, can you comment on that? What's the value of the combination? It was an amazing night, but anything you can say regarding the value of the combination, and whether it might have actually kept me in the happy high set point, and didn't allow me to make some discoveries that I otherwise might have been able to make.
Totally. There's a couple different ways that I can answer that. I think having a blissful merging with the divine, transcendent experience, related connectedness, trusting the inner healer and intelligence, I would probably spend time. Why was that in your greatest? Why was that in service to your highest good? Maybe that was designed particularly for you. So I would do an inquiry around that, of just, how was that for my highest good that I had that experience? What did I learn from that? I would also say, I would be really curious if you could even just separate it out so you could have that experience. I think the combination, that combination sounds very lovely and transcendent. One of the things that we do is we work specifically, and we have an agreement before we go into the session, of what is something that somebody's really stuck on, and perhaps a very maybe traumatic experience. And if you think of trauma, it's where were you so overwhelmed that the intensity of the experience overwhelmed your resources, whether you were young or it was just a crazy experience. And you set that intention to visit it. So we will actually bring that up in a therapeutic setting. It's very different when it's, I feel, with the intention to go in and work on something and be with it and connect with the inner healer and intelligence. So I would say there's a way to really do it therapeutically that could change the dynamic for you.
Okay.
I wonder too if the group aspect affects it too, that you have 13 other spirits around you, that.
You know what? I would say no, because we were all encouraged to stay on our mats, with our masks, and obviously we were drowning in this beautiful sound healing. So the only sound I really heard were the 2 or 3 of the 13 who were very tearful. They had clearly met their demons and their sorrows, and so I don't know that that was it. I mean, for me, it was sort of astounding. I would stand up, and I wasn't supposed to, and I really felt like my vision was 12 feet in the air. I was not looking down. I wasn't seeing myself. That would be great. Maybe I need more med, but it was no. So I don't know that that was the case. And it's all good. I'm just I guess I'm gearing up for the next one I'll do, and I'm thinking maybe it'll just be, I don't know. You're encouraging me, Dr. Esalen. I might be able to get that experience just with MDMA. And I'm not worried about, ego death. In fact, I sort of want ego death. I assume I can't. I mean, I was looking forward to getting to that place. So, bring it on. But
sure. If you don't mind, since you came forward with a question, I'm going to dive just a little bit into what I'm picking up.
Yep.
So I feel your enthusiasm. I feel your goal directedness. Even the word demon, that has a very strong label, right? Like that it's going to be this certain experience. And so perhaps for you, the deeper medicine journey is allowing and opening and receiving. And perhaps it's not demons, they're just parts of you. Yeah. And one of these parts that actually I feel here is this action-oriented, let's make it happen, because it has some kind of belief there that if this doesn't have action, then something. So there's a core belief sometimes attached to our protectors. So I would just be in that inquiry of perhaps maybe they're not demons, maybe they're aspects of you. And then how could you be in total surrender and a softening and allow yourself to be received rather than making something happen? And perhaps you'll be really surprised what happens in that journey.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I have another question, but I want to open up. Does just raise your hand if you had a specific question. I had a question, Dr. Liz. So when we have people, I filled a lot of applications for people wanting to begin microdosing, especially in the last 6 months. And, because it's being positioned in the mainstream media for mental health almost exclusively, it's a lot of people are coming who have severe PTSD, suicidal ideation, very, very extreme cases. And mushrooms aren't necessarily the right fit because of that, because they tend to amplify things. I love Rosalind Watt's description of when she was at Imperial doing the research studies and they were choosing which candidates, she always asked them, could you withstand an intensification of your current circumstances? And if they were in a no way, they were not a good candidate for the high dose study. So when we do see people that are so traumatized or in such a raw state of transition and overwhelm, where maybe mushrooms aren't the right fit, it sounds like MDMA might be the right fit for someone in that circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I just, like you said, to have that full experience of maybe where I am erased and who I am is who you are and who we are. And, I am part of this bigger thing that can be really threatening and really scary. So even if we weren't talking about a psychedelic assisted, I'd be working with somebody to get in their body and get with their breath again. And how do you pace? How do you move? How do you be with things? How do you witness it with a kind of curiosity and a compassion. So there are foundational building blocks to be able to do big experiences. But what they found in therapy, this idea around talk therapy, if I can just talk about this thing and have this like catalytic, intense moment, if I can retell my story, the idea was that will cure. But guess what? It can re-traumatize people, because if you are just going back in that state and you're not staying connected with self, and you are not able to differentiate between then and here and now, and have that presence practice and connection and resource with your body, it's not helpful. So any kind of different foundational therapies before you go into thought, existentialism, it really needs to slow down and come to very somatic work, I would say presence work. And then absolutely, I would feel really sad if somebody had an experience, they were re-traumatized and it was too much and they couldn't integrate it. And then that kind of just really made them go backwards, because they're suffering probably more than most people. So slowing it down, giving them experiences of like, oh, there's my breath. Oh, that's how I can just be here. Like, oh, that's who I inherently am. That's you. Like, this is life. And with that, if we can have little openings, like we said earlier, that is where then your personal transformation goes and where you keep working on that. So, yeah.
Oh, how much, when it comes to working with MDMA, does the energy of the, did you call them the pair, the therapeutic pair? So
Maybe.
it's two guides.
It's
when
two
you're
guides,
having the
yes.
experience, yeah, there's two people there with you, supporting you. When it comes to psilocybin guiding, the energy of the guide is very, very important to have done the work of preparation to clear their energy, because you are merging in a way with the person. So when working with your therapeutic pair, is that similar when it comes to MDMA? Can you speak to that?
Well, I would say we need to honor the lineage from which we have co-evolved with plants, and plants have come to assist us in our highest good. So there have been a long lineage of healers and how you do these journeys, and you approach it with sacredness. And people who have been doing this for a long time, who have really helped formulate and guide it. So I would say, even though I'm a clinical researcher, we absolutely need to be setting the intention. We need to be doing spiritual hygiene, clearing the space, being really thoughtful of the sacred container. Set and setting is everything. We know that to be true. So I would say that is just as important with MDMA. And then there is a psychic space that you learn how to dance with somebody as a pair. And so how you find that, you need to have time, you need to build a relationship. And I would say ultimately, if you've done your work and you trust your inner healing intelligence, if you trust the journey, you trust the medicine, then you don't need to control it as much. You can trust that the container and both of the guides will hold it. Even if a session sometimes allows for projection and a client needs to kind of get mad at one person because they're reenacting something, perhaps maybe without gender or that similar features, that you hold it together and that you allow that to carry the journey. And I love dancing, and I've done contact improv. I don't know, it's like the first time I saw it, I was like, what are these people doing? This is so far out there. But you take turns of like, initiating and then being receptive. And then the things that you can do, I mean, you can really dance. So I would say co-leading as a therapy pair is a lot like a big sacred dance with the client.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Mhm. Yeah. So we just have a minute left. Anybody else have a question, thought? Dr. Liz, do you have any parting thoughts you would love to share with us? Any advice, wisdom? You know, one of the things I love so much about this community and group is we all are in personal relationship with the medicines and with each other, and then we're going out into the world, into our circles and families, and kind of instilling, you know, in our loved ones a sense of reverence and respect for the medicines, and approaching this work in a slowed down fashion, versus kind of a commodity, an experience to be had. So yeah.
A couple different thoughts. We are at such a critical phase where this has been repressed, and any little things could set back the movement. And so when we do this with integrity and thoughtfulness, and this is why I love actually participating in clinical research and expanded access, because I want to do everything to bring the fullest integrity of this medicine so it can be an accessible treatment. And so there are safe parameters, and it is a really supervised and well-held journey. So even though there's so much excitement, it's also pacing and surrendering to the moment. And like you said, just, you know, in my training, Rick Doblin came, and, you know, one of his parting words were, "Don't fuck it up." Like basically like, slow it down. Like people have been doing this work and we're so close. So we need to be really thoughtful, and just like do your part to really bring it with the intention. So I would honor that. And I just feel like our collective prayers, so that we can have access to different treatments that really help us all evolve. I mean, our collective prayer, I think we're all holding that. And I love that you all are getting a sense of the magical elixir and bringing to your communities. And thank you. Thank you for all of this work, and that we're just going to be holding this powerful intention to be accessible.
Thank you. Thank you. That's hilarious. It very much sounds like Rick Doblin. That's awesome. Alexa had one quick question. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. You've mentioned breath a couple times. I've been taking notes, and I have breath with lots of exclamation points. I've tried yoga a few times, and I've wanted to really come into it during the pandemic, because I can't really go to a class, and I do it, and then I don't know if my shoulder blades are supposed to be up or down, and I get discouraged, and so I don't know where to start with breath work. I thought that was going to be my place. So someone who's just totally, I'm a runner, I'm not, you know, breath, this kind of breath work is totally new to me. And so do you have any suggestions for a total newbie on resources to learn good breathing techniques?
Well, as a runner, I just want to say you're more of an expert than you realize of doing fire breath, and even you know, when you run is actually, you're saying which is a prayer sometimes. So you actually are already experienced at moving energy through the body with your breath. So I just kind of wanted to say that. personally, everybody thinks that I love yoga. It's so interesting when they meet me. I think I look like a quintessential like yogi or whatever. I can't do it. I really like, I have a hard time with it. I don't like people telling me what to do with my body. I'm a little bit of a rebel. So I don't think maybe yoga is for everybody. And then
Thank you.
meditation, mindfulness, I think it's amazing, but people can have a traumatic reenactment if they pause and get still and have flooding. So I would work first with orienting your senses. So doing very sensory aware. So we have our normal sight, smell, touch, but we also have proprioception, how we move in space. And probably the most important sense is interoception. So this is when we bring awareness to what is happening inside our body. This is where you feel maybe breath, maybe expanding and contracting your lungs. You can feel maybe different joints along your back and your spine. All these little things. That interoception actually, if they have found, will help release trauma from the body. It's an amazing, just body-based practice that you can begin there. And then breath work, there's a couple different things that you can do. So you can do like a scanning where you start maybe perhaps with your feet on the floor, and then you move up different body parts and you clench for a moment and you breathe in and you tense. And then you exhale and you release that body part. And that's a progressive where you're using breath to kind of tense, draw energy, and then release. So you get that experience. There's another breathing technique that it's called box breathing. So you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and then you have empty breath for a count of 4. And that actually can expand to 5, 6, 7. So thinking of box breathing. Just to know, like I worked in behavioral medicine, and what they found is it's most important to have the stronger exhale, because that can then trip your parasympathetic nervous system rather than your sympathetic, which is activated all the time. That deep exhale is what signals to your body it's time to be safe, it's rest, digest, and open. So focusing perhaps on longer exhales than your inhales would be another thing. And then the last thing I would say, there's also fire breath. So, but you're sending the breath all the way down to your belly instead of with your ribs. You find a way to really send it down, and that actually can ignite like a core fire that goes up and down in your spine. And then that can actually produce some pretty amazing emotional and physical alchemy in your body.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Liz.
Yeah.
So good to see you.
Oh, what a joy. Thanks for letting me geek out with you all. This is like, I love this. Thanks for having me so much. And thanks for what you all are doing. I just really want to honor you, Casey. Thank you. And all of you for the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Our great pleasure. Thank you. Cool. All right, everybody.
Night, everyone.